To begin the meal, I'd like to begin with a traditional toast. I'd like to toast to the freedoms that we now enjoy and to freedoms lost that we shall regain. A more modest toast. Dinner will be served immediately, and we'll get underway with festivities immediately after dinner. Thanks a lot. Is that okay? Ready? Yep. Get underway now. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's kind of I hear it's a little bit getting miserable out there tonight.
It's not so cool in here.
It's a little warm in here right now too, I realize. We're here tonight to kick off a real exciting experience, but before we get into that, first of all, I have to deliver a few paid political announcements. In the first place, I just want to let everyone know that for those of you who are here tonight who maybe haven't made their minds up yet, or aren't sure yet whether they will be attending, or haven't made up their minds, or just want to see what's happening first, there's still room for the workshop on the weekend, and for the Monday night workshop too, which can be two separate events. You don't have to be going to both if you want to go to one or the other, or if you haven't got the time or the room to get in. The bar will be open throughout the evening, but will be temporarily closed through when I introduce the guest of honor this evening. I'd also like to extend an invitation to everyone here tonight, even if you're not going to be with us tomorrow, for a get-together at my place here in London at 153 Springbank Drive tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. to midnight. We did this the last time we had this event, and everyone had a great time that night. So if you want any details of how to get there or anything like that, be happy to give you directions after the event. So that's basically the basic announcements. Now the other announcement I want to make is sort of an issue-related announcement, in the sense that Freedom Party this fall will be addressing two particular issues with all the attention right now focused on the GST. Taxes are on everyone's minds. And I want to make it clear this evening that one of the things we'd like to do, particularly before the next election, is to become identified, particularly on the issue of taxes. We're going to hear a lot about the GST over the next coming year and a half. Regrettably, it's getting too much attention while taxes are going up in virtually every other sector around us. It's funny when you think about it. When I look back over the history of Freedom Party, I realize that we've had some pretty successful tax campaigns, although we haven't been really marketing them as such. That included everything from our original Pan Am campaign, which we ran in 1984, to our ongoing BIA campaigns, which are really a tax campaign, and even to the point of having, for example, when here in the City of London, we had over 5,000 signatures submitted to the City Hall protesting the self-awarded pay increases that municipal councillors and trustees gave themselves a couple of years back. They were in the 30 to 40% range. So we've been doing a lot of work on this, but to be honest with you, looking for concrete solutions and a concrete way to tackle the tax issue is not as easy as it may seem. And in view of the event that we're going to be having this weekend, I thought maybe I'd plant it in your mind before we go into this weekend workshop. Maybe if you can think of some ideas that might strike you during the experience that we might be able to undertake on the issue of taxes. We're willing to entertain any kind of suggestions on campaigns, things we can do, how we can create public awareness, what we can do ourselves. So please come forward to me and mention some of your suggestions to myself or to any one of the other people that I'll be introducing shortly who are with Freedom Party. And on another issue, there's been a lot of concern recently, and for good reason, on the environment. And this is not an issue that Freedom Party has been really heavily involved with one minor exception right now with Barry, your efforts in Welland there, trying to get the Welland River cleaned up, which by the way, is reported in one of our latest issues of the Freedom Flyer. But this is an issue that definitely has to be addressed from a free market freedom perspective, because regrettably most of the solutions that are coming forth today really aren't solutions in the long term. So I want to announce that we're going to have an event just about almost exactly a month from now, just a little over, October 29th. We're going to do something a little unusual. We're going to have a Sunday morning brunch. Sound good? In Toronto, near the airport. I forget the name. I think it's the Constellation Hotel. That's correct. And it'll be Sunday, October 29th. We're going to be bringing Dr. Walter Block, senior economist at the Fraser Institute, in to discuss the environment. He'll be speaking for an hour on the subject and entertaining questions on just about any other subject after his short, 1-hour speech. We did invite David Suzuki to debate Walter Block. He has already since refused that opportunity, given his strong views on the environment, and not to mention his strong views on economics and what he thinks of economists. If anyone saw his column 2 weeks ago, Saturday, I don't know if it was syndicated in every paper, but we had hoped that perhaps he might want to debate Walter, but that was not to come. But nevertheless, we're going ahead with the event. We're going to have a couple other surprises there, a few other guests. So, and all the details will be forthcoming in a mailer to everyone in this room. So, prices, times, place, and I really encourage you to get out. It's going to be an interesting issue, and I think we're going to have a perspective on it that you do not hear too often. So basically, that's it for announcements. Now, just one other little thing we want to do is we have one little mini event here prepared for you. One of the things, Freedom Party's been around now for, this is our 5th year of activity. We started in 1984. And we've been growing slowly, and we want, really I'm here tonight not so much to proselytize about what we want to do in terms of setting up goals and things like that, but really to thank a lot of you here tonight. I was really surprised, going over some of the records. We've been here 5 years in existence, really how loyal so many of you have become over the years. We seem to have a really good retention rate for a lot of our members. I don't know if we're doing something right or maybe just not doing something too wrong. Whatever the reason for that is, we really appreciate it. And to extend that appreciation tonight, we have a little special award for a number of you here. I know some of you might be a little surprised that you're going to be getting this, but I want to call a number of you up tonight. What we have is what I've called, I guess we're going to call them the Freedom 200 pins. I'm modeling one for you right now. And the idea of this pin, this is a tiny gold pin in green, black, and gold. And there are only ever going to be 200 of these in existence. And basically, this is our symbol of recognition to those of you who have been steady supporters. The only criteria for getting one of these, really, is that you have to be a member and supporter for at least a year. So for those of you who've been with us a little less than a year, we hope that you're going to be here within the next year to get one of these pins awarded. There are certainly more people that qualify for these pins who aren't here with us this evening, but will be awarded at some time in the future. One of the other criteria is that in some way the person that's going to get this has been a repeat supporter. He just didn't come by once and say hi and we never saw him again. He's been a repeat supporter, someone we can count on for steady support. And of course the other criteria of getting one of these pins is that they're publicly awarded so that other people can see who is supporting Freedom Party and just what kind of party this is. Because really, Freedom Party is about people, and the people that make up this party are going to project the image of this party and the future of this party. And the people that are going to form the first 200 of these who get these pins are really our stepping stone on to better and greater things on in the future. So I'm going to be giving out approximately, it looks like, depending on how many people are here, I haven't checked everyone, I'm going to go through the list, roughly around 32 of these this evening before I introduce our guest of honor this evening. So just to get that going, I'd like to start off with my lovely wife, Brenda. Brenda is more than just a person who puts up with my frustrations and my dealings with this party and everything. She's been a real active campaigner for us. She's done everything from pamphleting to managing our office earlier this year. So she's been a terrific support for me, terrific support for Freedom Party, and there's your
Thanks,
pin.
though.
Nobody else gets anything. Our next pin, I'd like to award to our illustrious Action Director, Mr. Mark Emerling. Now, what can I really say about Mark that he hasn't already said about himself? But Mark's been our Action Director. He's a founding member. He's one of the key supporters and driving forces behind this party. Has been, likely will continue to be. I think this is probably the only kind of party that could ever tolerate a person like that. And that may be why we need a party like this. Mark?
All right.
We're
I was just getting nostalgic at our table here, which is a fatal thing. That's why they only put me with 2 new people. And I was telling Bill and Alini all about those wonderful times I had hauling garbage around during the garbage strike, and they got dozens of prison stories already. And I didn't get dewy-eyed or anything, but I did recall how much I've enjoyed doing all this for 5 years and how much it really is a major, if not the major aspect of my life. And I really appreciate this one. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
And our next pin will go to
The envelope.
Lloyd Walker, our Vice President. Lloyd's been with us since 1985. Lloyd has been a candidate for London Centre. He got the great honor of running against David Peterson during the last election. Lloyd, come on up and...
All right, Lloyd.
Boy, what am I saying? You want to say something?
Yeah, I'll just briefly say something because I don't want to start a trend where everybody speaks. But at any rate, David Peterson did win.
Just my little story.
Yeah, maybe next time. Thanks very much, Bob.
The next pin I have to award is to a very special person. This person, too, is a founding member, founding executive member. He's currently a manager of special projects, which is an interesting title because what it lets him do is just about undertake any kind of project he wants to do. I'd like to introduce you to Murray Hopper. Murray? Murray's been a terrific supporter. He's a writer. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with a lot of his work in Consent magazine. He has written for the London Free Press. By the way, keep an eye out for this handsome face in the paper tomorrow. There is going to be an article, we believe it's tomorrow, in the Free Press going to be run with Murray against someone else. Both the pictures in the article are being run. The issue is minimum wage. So keep your eye peeled tomorrow in the London Free Press. And we'll see how that debate fares.
Thank you, Bob.
Next, I would like to award a pin to Mr. Robert Vaughn. Robert is our managing editor for Consent. Robert's also operating the camera this weekend and does a lot of work for us around the office. Next pin I have is for our current action coordinator, Mr. Greg Jones. Greg is our photographer, he's our handyman, he does just about does a lot of work around the office, including printing our newsletters. He gives us support every chance he can get. Greg's been a great supporter, and he's been with us since 1987, and Greg, we really appreciate having you. Next, not a founding executive member, but certainly a founding member. David Hogg has been with us for quite a while. Where's David sitting right now?
There you are, Dave.
David's been with us since January 184, probably since before Freedom Party was actually in operation. And David has been a tremendous help to us. Everything from getting us set up with our first computer back in 1984, which was a Commodore 64, I believe, at that time. David's a constant supporter. He gets involved in our campaigns. He puts up our election signs. Geez, I can't think of some of the other things he's done. It's just been a host of things, David. So you definitely are one of the eligible recipients of this fine award. Next, another great helper around the office, and a great person who's been a great person to help to me as well. It's Mr. Tom Offner. And Tom's looking at me real shocked right now. He didn't expect his name. Tom's been a terrific supporter. He's been with us since 1985. That's been quite a while already, Tom. I feel like I've known you all my life, and which is a good thing. I mean, we're always walking in and Tom always traveling around the world too, so we don't have him at our disposal all the time. But there you go, Tom. Thanks. On the list is the only other person other than myself who has run as a candidate for Freedom Party twice, I believe, 2 or more times, and that's Mr. Barry Malcolm, who's sitting right here in front of me. Barry's been a terrific support. Barry, you've been with us since 1985 as well, and I guess you've been having a great time that you had to actually go in and run an election twice. You did a terrific job.
Under duress.
Yeah. It's interesting. You were in London North last time. Diane Cunningham was the candidate that he ran against last time in the by-election. Interestingly, she is now one of the contenders for the leadership.
I spurred her on, haven't I, Bob? With my
Good job there, Barry. Come on up and get your...
Thank you, Bob. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
You've been at the Michael Emerling school?
Yeah. All right. Do it up.
Mark said for me.
Nice of the other parties to put their leaders up against our strength.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting being in London here, though. I know, David, you're from Toronto, but it's going to be great when we can run against both of the leadership candidates of the 2 largest parties. So, right here in the London area. Anyways, our next recipient has also been with us since actually before day 1 as well. He's been a terrific supporter, has done a lot of favors for us, has given us opportunities that we would never have otherwise had were it not for his presence. During Barry's election campaign, this gentleman paid for television advertising, the only television advertising we've ever had. Something I'd love to get into again in the future should such an opportunity offer itself. He was also a candidate for Freedom Party in 1985, when we only ran 3 candidates here in the 3 London ridings. And he's a well-known man about town, created a lot of controversy in the newspaper recently with a column he had printed a couple weeks ago. I'd like to introduce you to Rob Smith. Rob. This next gentleman has not been with us since day 1, but he has been with us since 1984. And as a matter of fact, I imagine he became a real avid supporter of Freedom Party since his last attendance at a workshop of this nature. He's been a terrific supporter, comes to all of our events. I mean, I'm just looking at all the things he's attended. He comes to just about everything, on top of being a consistent supporter throughout the year. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Gord Deans. Gord.
All right.
Wear it every day. Oh, you got a nice little pen there already? Take that one.
coming
The next gentleman I'd like to introduce is Executive President of our Don Mills constituency in Toronto. Was a candidate during election 87, has contributed writing, funds, all sorts of goodies to Freedom Party, including his expertise in and advice that we occasionally go to on computers, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. David Pengelly. The next person I'm going to introduce is a gentleman who started with us, actually he's been with us since '85, but was very intensely involved with us for a couple of years. He was our Freedom Party's past action coordinator. Gordon Mood is still a supporter, still comes out to our events. He's a busy entrepreneur right now, opening up a lot of stores all over town. Boy, I can never keep track of you sometimes. But your past support and your current support has always been appreciated, and I'd like you to be the recipient of one of these pins. Well, it's the quietest thing I've ever heard word said.
Talk about comic books, then you'll hear him go.
It crossed my mind, but didn't want to break a trend.
Next, I'd like to introduce to you, I figured after I introduced Gord, the most appropriate people I should introduce right away, Gord's parents, Lori and Lois Mood, and they have been supporters, avid supporters since 1985. I guess, I don't know who dragged who into the party, whether it was Gord or the other way around, because after talking to all of you, you sure have that philosophy of freedom intact in that family, let me tell you. Lori and Lois Mood, please.
I'll be quiet too. So.
Like son.
That's difficult.
Next gentleman I'd like to introduce has been creating, he's probably our star candidate representative right at the moment. He's continually getting himself into trouble in his community. That's Barry Fitzgerald I'm talking about, who made the front page of our last newsletter. He also got to run in a recent by-election last year. He's a president candidate in the Welland Thorold constituency, and Barry's been involved in a number of issues from BIAs to trying to clean up that pollution in the Welland River. Barry, you're a one-man dynamo in the Welland Thorold area. You are definitely. Just before he was going to run as a candidate, and this guy was really worried that he could do a decent job or could convey the image properly or was even capable of doing it. And I think through his experience, I think you want to talk to him. He's going to be here this weekend and just get an idea of sometimes, he says he could be doing more, that may be the case, but he can do a lot more if he gets the support he needs in his area as well. But it's amazing what one individual can do. He's really created a storm in his area, and I think he's got a profile building in the Welland area that when people hear that name in the future, come future election campaigns, they'll identify with it. So that's a great thing on your part, great accomplishment. Next gentleman I would like to introduce is he's been with us since 1987, 2 years now, and he's been a terrific supporter and has come to our events whenever he can make it. Many of you may have seen his latest contribution to Consent magazine, which ran as a two-parter in the last 2 issues. I'd like to introduce you to Professor Ken Hilborn from the University of Western Ontario. Chris Balvanian didn't make it tonight yet, did he? I know he's going to try and get here. So we'll have to pass him over till next time. Next gentleman who's been with us now since 1986 is an executive of our Elgin Association, was candidate during election 87, has been a terrific supporter, is probably one of the most enthusiastic and happy people I've seen, regardless of what he's going through in his personal life, and I'd like to introduce you to Ray Monteith.
I'd like to say one thing, that Freedom Party is very, very important in my life, and it was because of these people over here that, and an article of Roberts, was it, that's your son name? Gordon. That Gord put in the paper, and that I telephoned his mother, I believe, and that's how I became acquainted with the Freedom Party, and it's very, very important to me.
Our next supporter has been with us since 1985. He is a constant supporter, comes to as many events as she can possibly attend. In fact, she's been contributing a little more lately because we've been stealing some of her ideas in the form of her articles, one which just appeared in the latest issue of Consent. I'd like to introduce you to Andrea Hamilton. Next gentleman has been with us since 1987. Has been a supporter whenever, just a supporter financially whenever we wanted help deliver literature, get things organized for us, and has come out to our event tonight. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. William Down. Next, I have two people that have been with us since 1987. I think they got interested, they have attended many of our other events. I think they got interested in our party because of our stand on rent control, being in the landlord business, I guess. And they've been terrific supporters ever since they came on board, and I'd like to introduce you to Frank and Linda Doverstein. The next gentleman I'd like to introduce to you has recently undertaken a new career. He's leaving London, unfortunately, for me, starting a career in Guelph. He's been heavily involved with Freedom Party whenever he could get away from his heavy studies at the university over the past many years. And Andrew Steckley was a tremendous support to me during the 1987 election. I think he was right beside me there. He was my chauffeur. He was my advisor. He was just a terrific help through that campaign. Andrew, I'd like to reward you with that. Next gentleman's been with us since the end of '84. I can't even remember when we first met. Can't remember the first time, Dave. It's been 4 years already since we've known each other. You've been coming to our events, almost every one we've had since 1984. I don't think you've missed too many, except you missed the last Emerling because you forgot about it.
I work with Big Pay.
That's okay, we got his money, so we got his support. And for that reason, Dave Southern, you're going to get him. The next lady's been with us since the beginning, since before the beginning, and she's done a tremendous amount of work for us, been a supporter, probably delivered thousands of pieces of literature over the years. I know many of you already know her, Sandy Chrysler.
All right.
gentleman, actually, I just met for the first time this evening. He's been with us since 1986. Has supported us since, I guess, he got in touch with us, and I hope that he'll be getting more involved with us as the time goes on. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Bill Trench. Getting to the bottom, Next gentleman has been with us since 1985. And, for a brief period, the Freedom Party had a campus club going on the University of Western Ontario campus, and this gentleman was president of that campus association for a period of time. I think we went for about 2 or 3 years there before we found that without people like this individual, having a campus association wasn't always as productive as it could be. But we certainly held a couple of interesting events and had some interesting opportunities open to us as a result of his actions, and he's been a supporter since 1985. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Ian Gillespie. Now I have one more couple to introduce to you. And they got just in under the wire because they've been with us just over a year, but have been terrific supporters. They've turned on all kinds of other people to us, have given us all kinds of referrals, have helped around the office whenever they can, and have come to all the events that we've held since they've encountered us. I'd like to introduce you to Paul and Debbie Blair. Unbelievably, the last gentleman I'm going to be awarding one of these pins to is our guest of honor this evening. Unbelievably, we were talking earlier this evening, we've actually known each other for about 10 years now, which is quite a remarkable thing. This is actually his second workshop under the auspices of the Freedom Party, though he's held many other workshops, and I recall, I guess it's around 10 years ago when I was one of the people sitting in the audience listening to this gentleman speak, comfortably sitting in the back row, trying to hide and be as shy as I usually was. I think if any single individual has had a tremendous impact on my getting involved in politics, getting involved in this effort for freedom, I can certainly think of no individual who would be more influential in this regard than our guest this evening. He's flown up from Las Vegas. He arrived yesterday. I hope he's over his jet lag now. And he's recovered, and he's got all that energy. He's going to be just feeding into us for the next few days. I'd like to introduce you to our guest of honor this evening. And from here on in, I'm going to turn over the whole show to Michael. He'll be our host for the rest of the weekend. And I get to join the party just like all the rest of you. And that's what I like about these kinds of events. Everyone, Michael Emerling. You can take the name tag off now too, Michael. I think,
we know who you are.
I know, but if it gets really dry, I might need to know who I am. Before I begin, I'd like to do a little something that I have as a surprise. For those of you who don't know my background, it's weirder than it sounds. What Mark Emery does for sex and sort of sleazy living, I have done for eccentricity and sort of being a freelance intellectual.
Obviously a very bright man.
So you get to go from the gutters to the ivory towers in one fell swoop.
He's got to go, eh, Mark?
Mark and I have a sort of a standing understanding. We used to have a sitting understanding, but he stood up. And Mark, I remember the first time he attended one of my workshops, he and I were engaged in, you remember the movie Deliverance with dueling banjos? This is sort of dueling cheap shots. And it was, he would make one and I would make one, and he would make one and I would make one. And everybody decided it was more entertaining than the workshop. So we stopped doing the workshop and we went on the road. During the last year, next month I'm completing my 7th book. This will be under my own name. I've been ghostwriting books for people in other fields. So much for the theory that your well-known so-and-so is, you said, gee, I can't believe he actually wrote a book. He didn't. So don't be surprised. But in the course of doing this, I've been doing some work in an area that some people have called psychoepistemology, some people have called meta-epistemology, and some people have called how do you do what you do when you do what you do it? And I said, well, I call it mind focus. And it's basically about how to more effectively utilize your own abilities. Don't be impressed by the language. Don't go, psychoepistemology, that's got more syllables than a government program. Don't worry about it. It's very simple and straightforward. And I would like to surprise a couple people. I did a prototype training program, which is already being bought by objectivist philosophers like David Kelly and George Smith. And I'd like to give the 2 first copies produced to my friend Mark Emerling and my friend Robert Metz.
Oh, excellent.
You're right. Bootleg copies will be available tomorrow morning. Actually, Mark is opening a bookstore now for illiterates. It's called City Darks. Oh, lighten up. I have a little bit of a difficulty, and I will ask you to agree with me on certain things, and they're like this. I have a difficulty in the sense that I am a freelance intellectual. I have written 6 books and 1 doctoral dissertation. I've got 1 book coming out, I hope, early next year under my own name, and then another one later on next year. I have a difficulty in the sense that most of my colleagues who are more scholarly are much more sedate and laid back. Can we say it? Boring. I'm teasing, because some of the best and brightest people you meet, from Robert Nozick in philosophy to David Kelly in philosophy to Roy Childs in fields of sociology to Dr. Murray Rothbard in economics, to Leonard Liggio in history, have demonstrated that there is no conflict between being bright and being passionate about your career. So if sometimes you go, this guy's going a little strange, it happens when you're not part of a faculty. You're allowed to do it, they can't fire you and things like that. And I want you to allow me certain leeway. Just sort of pretend that I'm Mark Emery's social life on Quaaludes. And it'll start making sense. By the way, the Center for Disease Control has listed him as their poster boy.
What?
As he used to say, an anatomy is a terrible thing to waste. See, it'll sink in later, Mark. Don't worry about it. He's been doing old Cagney movies in prison, and he went from Jailhouse Rock to Jailhouse Stone to out of the jailhouse, and I'm not going back to the jailhouse. I will give his prison time one good thing. There's a story about Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, and Thoreau refused to pay his tax because it was going to finance the imperialistic war against Mexico. And it was very clearly an attempt to seize extra land for the United States government. And Thoreau says, I ain't going to pay it. So they arrested him, dragged him to jail. And his friend and fellow transcendentalist, Ralph Waldo Emerson, went to his jail cell and said, Henry, what are you doing in there? And Henry looked at him and said, no, that's not the question. The question is, what are you doing out there? And I'd like to give that response and that point of view to Mark and congratulate him for his heroic ability to not only have a good time and meet the kind of people that he can appreciate, but to living on behalf of his ideas. I think that's really wonderful. This is too far back. I've got this claustrophobia. That's a morbid fear of Santa Claus. Oh, lighten up. Comedy is not pretty. I was going to share with you a few things. Is that one of the neat things is I gave a mind-focused seminar in Philly a couple weeks ago, and one of the people that demanded to write an introduction was Tommy Smothers of the Smothers Brothers. Now, a lot of you get the idea that he's the dumb brother, but he is probably one of the comedic geniuses of the 60s and now. And I'm very pleased to be able to work with him on some comedy writing projects. And for those of you who don't see the connection between writing in politics and writing in comedy, you didn't get the point. The only difference is when they make a joke, it's usually legislated in Ottawa. Oh, hey, my jokes don't hurt anybody. Their jokes are worse than hurting. They're law. Now, tonight I was going to talk about something called the games freedom advocates play. And I wanted to use something called game theory to explain some of the things that go on in the Freedom Party. Now, this is intended to be not serious, and it's not about anybody in this room. It's about some of the people who aren't here that we can talk about because they can't get to us. So if this sounds like it might be sort of like someone you know, it is. If it sounds like someone in the room, it isn't. And if it sounds like someone who might not have been here who should have attended, it probably certainly is. The time was ancient Rome. A Jew walks by the emperor's gathering point and salutes, as was the custom. The emperor says, "How dare you, a Jew, salute me, the emperor?" And screams to his guards, "Take him out back and behead him." Serious. They drag him out back and behead him. Takes about an hour for word to get around Rome. If you're Jewish, don't salute the emperor. Not a good procedure. Next morning, same area. Along walks another Jewish man, minding his own business. He's not falling for this trick. He doesn't salute. The emperor says, "How dare you, a Roman citizen, not salute me, the emperor? Take him out back and behead him." His advisor is standing next to him, and naturally advisors take the heat for everything that goes wrong. It's never the office holder, it's always his advisors. Nixon didn't have anything to do with Watergate, it was the advisors. Pierre Trudeau didn't have anything to do with those photos of his ex-wife, it was his advisors. So his advisor looks at him and says, "Excuse me, sir, I realize that you're the most important and wise, etc., 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 kiss, 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 person in the kingdom, but yesterday you executed a Jew for saluting you, and today you executed a Jew for not saluting you. Isn't that a little inconsistent?" The emperor looks at him and says, "Don't you teach me how to persecute Jews." And there's no difference between that kind of behavior and people that want to go after advocates of freedom. You've got to remember the law is not an objective fact. The law is subject to the interpretation of people who do not have your best interest at heart. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Can you imagine people getting up early in the morning in Ottawa and saying, "Let's go out and do good," no matter what it costs the people that are having it done to them? Which reminds me of another quote from Henry David Thoreau. He said, "If I knew for certainty that a man was coming to my house to do me good, I should flee for my life." That's a good policy. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a concept, game theory, and I'm going to apply it to some of the things that go on in the dynamics of organizations and in the dynamics of running for office. Now, if the shoe fits, sell it to somebody else, make a profit, but don't wear it. It's intended to be humorous. It's intended to give you some insights and hopefully give you some tools to be a little more effective in your own political activism. Because I got to tell you something about politics that really disturbs me. I have been involved in politics for, God, years and years and years and years and years. Since I read Ayn Rand in 1969, I joined Society for Individual Liberty in 1970, and I joined the Freedom Libertarian Movement in the United States in 1975. So I've been active for a long, long time. A few years ago, I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, back in 1981, and I had been running political campaigns, 60 of them, in fact. You want to wear yourself out, run 60 campaigns for candidates who can't win, who can't raise money, who have no chance, who have serious self-esteem problems. I moved to Las Vegas. I did day labor to get myself back on my feet. And I decided what the heck, and I went into import automotive sales. I sold Mercedes-Benz, Toyotas, and Isuzus. And so I thought, well, I'll call my mother up and let her know that things are finally back on their feet. And I said, so I called her up on the phone. She lives in Tucson, Arizona. I said, hey, Mom, good news. I said, I'm out of politics. And my mother is Scotch-Irish lady, and she goes, oh, thank God. That's such a dirty, dirty, dirty business. What are you doing now? I'm selling cars, Mom. 2 minutes of silence that reached down and touched me. Anytime you think that you have a perception party as a member of a political minority, and you are a political minority, it's called an individual. That is the smallest minority on the planet. And when you advocate individual freedom, as the Freedom Party does, then you have a real perception problem in the sense that, gee, you're not for more government? Is there something wrong with you? You know, can you imagine? It's like getting drug counseling from Colombian drug lords. What's the matter? You don't want to play the game? Few murders and you get upset? Big deal. We have a perception problem, and part of the perception problem comes from inside and part from outside. I'm going to deal with the inside part, and the outside part we'll just all work on together over the weekend. There was a book a number of years ago. Now, game playing theory works like this. What you do is you take an idea, and you just analyze it in terms of a game. For example, the book's Games People Play by Eric Byrne took normal behavior that people thought they were engaging in and analyzed it. And they found out that, for example, the woman who thought she was having a perfectly reasonable conversation did not know she was being hit on by Mark Emery, as of course any living, breathing woman is. And that's only because necrophilia are still illegal. I'm sorry, he doesn't like women that cold. Now, what we do is we take this, we apply it to a whole number of situations. Now, I had some situations I applied it to early in life. Remember the book Future Shock? Remember the book Future Shock? Alvin Toffler comes along and he says, speed is accelerating. Things are changing so quick that it's really hard for us to cope with it. And sooner or later, we're not going to be able to adapt. Right? So we're all going to have future shock. Now, a friend of mine, Dr. Murray Rothbard, who's a free market economist and a student of Ludwig von Mises in the Austrian school, and I were having a conversation, and I had a vision of what future shock would be like. Murray Rothbard, free market economist, teaching at UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, goes into a Baskin & Robbins 31 trillion flavors. He looks at the board listing the different flavors and collapses, never again to deal in the normal world. Well, the problem with Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock, is he didn't realize that all of us generate strategies to make decisions. You know, I don't wander down the street and wonder whether I have to take up a career in shoe shining, or wonder if there's an Amway distributorship opening up in my neighborhood. It doesn't occur to me. And it doesn't occur to me because that is not in my choice decision tree. Now, it occurred to me that it would be kind of good if we could do this in game areas so that we could point to certain mistakes that our fellow freedom advocates might be making, and out of the goodness of our heart, we can humiliate and degrade them in front of their friends. But please don't do it tonight, because it doesn't involve anyone in this room. It's someone else. Okay, now, there was a philosopher named Schopenhauer. Did you guys ever read Schopenhauer in college? Anybody ever read? He's the most depressing philosopher. All right, now, let me tell you how depressed the guy got. I want you to imagine this. You are teaching at the same university and at the same era as Immanuel Kant. That's enough to ruin your week. Immanuel Kant is packing the lecture halls. Can you imagine people in line to listen to a philosopher talk? I mean, that hasn't happened again since Rand talked at Fort Hall Forum. It just doesn't happen. Schopenhauer decides, very heroically, this is the General Custer strategy, I will hold my lectures at the same time Immanuel Kant does. This is a man who's going to have feelings of persecution. Anyway, Schopenhauer got very depressed, and he did a whole philosophy of pessimism. And it basically boiled down to the premise, life stinks, figure it out for yourself, schmuck. And the rest of it was detailed. If you haven't read it, I've read all of Schopenhauer, and I got to tell you, that's the bottom line. You can skip all the footnotes. That's what it's all about. It's much different than Pollyanna. You know, the Pollyanna attitude on her gravestone has got a note, I'm glad I'm dead. Now, it'll sink in later. Okay. Anyway, Schopenhauer did one thing that was really cool. Schopenhauer said, you know, there's only a finite number of stupid things people can do. Right? Boy, was he wrong. He had never been to Ottawa. These people are having evolving stupidity, higher levels of stupidity, more complex stupidity. But Schopenhauer came to the idea, well, there's only a certain number of logical errors people can make. You know, you can make the fallacy of the excluded middle term, you can make the fallacy of contradiction, and on and on and on. And he said, wouldn't it be a great idea if we gave all of these logical fallacies a name? Right? And instead of arguing with people, you just name it. That's a number 701. I can't talk to you anymore. And I thought that would be kind of cool, because if you name a fallacy, a lot of times that's all you need to do to sort of discourage it. For example, my mother is Scotch-Irish. And is anybody here Jewish background? Serious. Anybody Jewish? None? Let me tell you, Scotch-Irish make Jewish people look liberal and nice. Scotch-Irish women invented guilt. Don't let them ever tell you Jewish mothers are bad. Scotch-Irish are the worst, worst, worst. And they do it more often. And they do it more subtly. And then they tell you how to feel bad because they made you feel bad. Okay. Now, my Scotch-Irish mother used to pull stuff like this. I'm going out for a date. I'm 16, right? Scrub cheeks, ready to go out with my girlfriend, Lynn. And we're going to go to a movie. And might even hold hands. This is the 60 friends. This is not Mark Emery's social calendar. Okay. And my mother does one of these routines. Go ahead, enjoy yourself. Don't worry about me. Well, it had never occurred to me to worry about her before she mentioned this. And I said, I wasn't going to worry about you. And she said, well, you know, something could happen. Your father's overseas, you know, in the military. And just if something happened to me, I didn't want you to worry. So finally, my brother and my sisters and me hit on an idea that what we should do is not take it seriously. So I answered, as I answer a lot in my life, something particularly rude. I said, I hadn't planned on worrying about your mom, but I'll tell you what, if you're going to die anyway, at least one of us will have a good evening. And what we did is we ridiculed her guilt routines, and to the point where she just quit it. And we've broken her the habit, and she's turned out to be a decent mother. You have to break your parents in very sensibly and smartly. So I want you to be aware of these kinds of things going on all the time. Now, why did my mother give me that line before I walked out the door? Right? It's the best form of birth control. It's awfully hard to have sex when you feel that guilty. Now, I didn't think of that because I was 16. It didn't occur to me. Right? But that was a game she was playing, the guilt game. Now, in games, what we're talking about, games are just structured human behavior. Like, for example, there's a conversation going on between a couple people, but there's also certain vibes going on beneath the surface. Now, we've all had games like that, dating games. I'm not talking about the TV show, I'm talking about real dating games. Fights that you have where the fight is not what you're fighting about. You ever have those? You liars. I know you don't have to raise your hands, but I know, I can tell. It's the way you look. Your eyes are closer together. Games is just a way of analyzing the behavior. When I call something a game, I do not mean to belittle it or consider it unimportant. I'm simply using it as an analytic tool. Is that clear? I don't want to really say this is a bad thing to do or it's an evil thing to do. I just say, let's look at another way of analyzing. Now, what you have in games people play is you've got certain roles that people play, like in book transactional analysis talks about games all the time. Oh, you're playing the wounded goose. Or you're playing I've got you, son of a bitch. Oh, you're playing wooden leg. You're playing rapo. They've got all these weird names for games. Now, everybody's got a specific role and they got a script. For example, you come into work 10 minutes late and your boss says, "You're late." That's move number one in the game. Everybody knew you were late because you have a watch, he has a watch, and you looked at your watches. So we're not really discussing the facts now, are we? There's more here than meets the eye. Now, your move, the next move is, I'm late because, right? I'm late because it was snowing. That's always a good excuse in London, right? During the winter, you know, that's a pretty good reason. Not during the summer. I'm late because of traffic. There's always traffic. That's an all-purpose excuse. I'm late because I wanted you to fire me so I could collect unemployment. I don't like working here anyway. But you're late is the beginning move. It's a gambit in a game. And it has nothing to do with imparting information. Because if you want to find out if it has to do with imparting information, next time your boss says you're late, say, you're right, and leave. He'll follow you to your desk and beat on you for a while until you play the game and he gets to go home and feel that he's made you feel bad and punished you and you'll never do it again. Now, there are scripts that are mandatory, there are scripts that are optional. And there's a point at which the game is complete and you can move on to real behavior and real dealing with each other. Now, there are academic games. I deal with some of my clients. I have a number of physicians who are clients of mine, and they play the I'll pay you when my accountant can get back to town game. I'm a speechwriter for them. And I play a real simple game called You Don't Get the Speech Until I Get the Money. And amazingly, they find a new signer for the check. What a surprise. That's a fun game. We play it every time. They have their fun, I have my fun, but I hold the speech till I get the money and the check clears. Now, I know it's a game and I know it's a power game. And it's all right. I'm not looking down or denigrating them. I'm just not going to tolerate it. Now, there are certain games that we play that are really a lot of fun. For example, there's a suicide game. Now, you remember, if you've ever had a friend do a suicide gesture. Suicide gesture is, not only is your life so miserable you ought to kill yourself, but you flunked it. You couldn't succeed at killing yourself. So if you have feelings of inadequacy, you get to double up on yourself. All right. Suicide game is, and they've interviewed a number of people who failed at suicide, and they'll be sitting there talking to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and depending on their particular orientation or their background, whether they're Freudian, Adlerian, or Fromium, or God knows what, they'll be discussing with them, and they find out that these people have very common fantasies. Now here's the fantasy. The fantasy of most, though not all, suicide flunkies, we'll call them suicide gestures, is that they had this vision that their body would be found by the person they wanted to find it, right? They've got this picture that they're somehow watching a video. It's like MTV only with death, okay? Now, their body is found by the person they want to punish, get even with, teach a lesson, never make forget. All right, and presumably they've got a suicide note. It's especially important that you don't want them to get any mixed messages about your dying. You want to make it real clear that it's their fault. All right, now, you'll find this a lot of times in romantic relationships. The guy, tell Laura I loved her. Laura finds the note in his body and is frigid for the rest of her life. That's the game. Because if you think about it, suicide is not exactly what you call an endearing human behavior. It's not highly productive, so there's got to be something going on beneath the surface. So they've discovered that, in fact, these guys are engaging in these kind of games. This is equally true in politics, it's equally true in social dealings, and it's equally true in our work, in our academics, and in other areas. There's the put-down game. There's the I'm better than you game. There's the I'm okay, you suck game. I'm okay, you're okay, I'm okay, you're not okay, we're both stink, we're both great. If you ever go to S, you know, we're both idiots, but it's okay. Now, every game has certain motives and payoffs, and it's got certain elements that make it interesting. I have friends who are evangelical Pentecostal Christians. I don't know whether you do. I tend to be eclectic in my choice of friends. I have everything from computer programmers to Jimmy Swaggart, who was framed by the Penthouse photos. Sure he was. Right, and your check is in the mail, and we're from the government, and we're here to help. Now, there's a game that they tell me out of the New Testament, out of the Synoptic Gospels. It's called The Christians from Heaven Watching the Wailing and Gnashing of Teeth of Sinners in Hell. And the game is that after I get my reward, See, I sacrifice in this life. I give to the church, right? I get to be altruistic, and they're spiritually selfish. They take all the bread, right? I die. I go up. Peter says, you're cool. You gave a lot of money to the church. Accepted Jesus, your Lord and Savior. In. Right? Now, part of your payment is they part the clouds, and you get to watch all those people that pissed you off and never went to church and were really rude to you and smarter than you and did better than you. And you get to watch them be punished. This is supposed to add ecstasy to your delight in heaven. This is sort of the idea that if Abraham Maslow could have watched Mengele experimenting, it would have been better. Anyway, that's a game, and it's a way of selling a program. This is not, I do not want to tar Christians with this brush. I want to make it very clear that it's just certain elements of fundamentalism that take that attitude. Now, the only concern I had there is it's really fortunate for the people that buy into that program that the dead can't come for a refund. Because it's not really a cool game. Now, the motives and payoffs can be as different with games as they are in any other human behavior. Why did you join the Freedom Party? I'll bet it's got as many different answers as it does different people in the room. What really attracted you? Isn't that true? I mean, if I went around and asked you, what was it especially attracted you about the party? It would be, for you it might be this, for you it might be that, for you it might be something else. For you it might be the fact that Mark Emery doesn't come to the office that often. I'm sorry, Mark is the younger brother that I would have killed in earlier life. So, I tease. Actually, I wouldn't tease Mark if I didn't. I don't like him much, actually. I'm teasing. He'll get even with me during the next year, right, after I'm gone. You know he will. Tomorrow. He can start tomorrow. Now, for example, there can be any number of motives for visiting the Empire State Building during the 50s. Some people might want to see the NBI building, the Nathaniel Branden Institute building, for those of you who come from a Rand objective background. Some might have wanted to see where King Kong climbed. And some might have gone for the waters if they were misinformed. It's for you Bogart fans. Now, the worst kind. Let's get right into the specific games that freedom advocates play. And I'm not making this unique to Canada. This is equally applicable to the United States. I have worked with the Foundation for Economic Education. I've worked with the Manhattan Institute. I used to work with the Cato Institute, but I pissed some people off, so I don't work with the Cato Institute anymore. I work with the Institute for Humane Studies, the Von Mises people, and I've got a lot of friends in different elements of the freedom individualism movement in the US and Canada. These are not unique. These are not, as a matter of fact, it's probably, you know how everybody's saying American programming on TV is screwing up your culture? This is probably all a US problem that we've inflicted on you.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to blame it on the US, I want you to know it's probably their fault anyway. So, first game that everybody plays, especially if you're a freedom advocate, is the victim game. Now, there's a difference between being a victim and playing the victim. I mean, we can all be victims. You can walk home, someone might stick a gun to your head and say, give me your money, and you might have to give them your money and leave. Or you might find that you get your value-added tax, or what do they call it, BST? BFD, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's a value-added tax. I can smell one at 50 feet. Anyway, you could get that inflicted on you, and you would, in fact, be a tax victim. Now, you can be a victim of the government. You can be a victim of racism, of sexism, of a religious persecution. You can be a victim of people who don't like computer programmers. You can be a victim of people who don't like smart people, of anti-intellectuals, of pro-intellectuals, of people that don't like people that wear clip-on ties, of people that like people who do. People can feel a victim forever. I had an acquaintance who was a card-carrying dykes on bike lesbian, and she used to tell me it was all men's fault that she couldn't succeed. And I had never really interfered with her lifestyle myself, so I was rather curious. I had heard during the 60s that the reason that black people did not succeed was because of you white racist thugs. The reason that Jews did not succeed in parts of New York is the Irish. They wouldn't clean up after the Jewish people, I guess. I don't know. You can feel a victim, and it's a nice game to play. You got to remember, feeling sorry for yourself is the greatest indoor sport on the planet. I did right and they didn't love me. I ran a good campaign and they didn't vote for me. It's their fault. Now, you can tell you're playing the victim game when you start playing the if it weren't for game. If it weren't for the state, if it weren't for the government, then I would be a multi-millionaire. And those of you who are doing well are somehow cheating. And you're going to go to a very low rung in freedom hell, I want you to know. So if it weren't for the state, if it weren't for this regulation, I wouldn't be failing. Well, you can notice they'll also come up with other sentences like, why doesn't someone do something about, and then fill in the program, about this tax, about this regulation. Now, there's no specific someone named. It's just, why doesn't anybody but me solve my problem, please? That's playing the victim. If you notice that you have a lot of your time spent in blaming other people, whether it's blaming the government, and they deserve a lot of it. They've earned it the old-fashioned way. You know, that's just when you blame the government. They really are responsible for a lot of the stuff. But if you want to spend your time feeling sorry for yourself until you can't succeed in rolling them back and you can't take your power back in your own life's hands, then you're playing the victim game. Now, there was a book called Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm. And in it, Fromm claimed that the reason everybody was into totalitarianism is because they were afraid of freedom. Scary, scary, scary. They didn't want to be free. What they wanted to be was enslaved. Yeah, that's a ticket, enslaved. Well, I think he got the thesis wrong. I believe that Erich Fromm made an analytic error. People were not afraid of freedom. They were afraid of personal responsibility. They were afraid to take their own life into their own hands and make their own decision and, by God, live with the consequences. Why do you think people want, I watched the protest in the newspaper about Take Back the Night rally by the sort of women who were no threat in even the most rape-prone city. I'm talking about crimes of violence here, I'm not talking about crimes of sex. You've got a city in Toronto where there are 3 rapes a year reported roughly, and you've got women saying they can't walk the street. If you want a city where you can't walk the street, come to Las Vegas. You'll get proposition, people give you rides. You won't have to walk the street. If you want a street where you can't walk, live in New York or Detroit. And I hear this, and it's like they can't even give you instances of sexual violence against women, so they have to start dreaming up other things. Yeah, well, I remember reading about domestic violence. Yeah, that's the same thing as in the street. And I thought, here are a bunch of people who are professional victims. Right? Pay attention to me because I've had life so bad. Life's been miserable. Now, that's a game. Now, what happens if you play the victim? What happens if you play the victim of the state, if you play the victim of the tax problems, the victim of regulations, the victim of sexual discrimination, the victim of racial discrimination, the victim of intellectual discrimination? The longer you play the game, the less effective you are at running your life. Because everybody responsible for your life is somebody other than you. Somebody else. Somebody except me. I'm off the hook. I don't have to do anything. Now, I have a friend, well, he's an acquaintance. I don't hang out with people that have these kind of loser programs. I have an acquaintance who's very, very bright. He's got an IQ which is probably higher than mine, which surprised me because...
I know how you feel.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Who's this guy? Just kidding. No, Mark's going to say, yes, I used to know how he felt too when I was younger. Now, this guy is a member of Mensa, and he's a member of the 4th quartile, which means he's in the top 1/2 of 1% in IQs. And he works as a dishwasher. This is not a mistake, this is a true story. He works as a dishwasher in a hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. And he has lengthy stories about how he is a victim of government. Well, I read the book Atlas Shrugged, and there was no mention in there about dwarfs shrugging. As far as I can tell, he's going to spend his whole life feeling sorry for himself and telling himself he was a victim. The longer he plays the game, the less chance he has of winning it. The longer he plays the game, the less his life works. The longer he plays the game, the less opportunity, control, money, sex, power, career ability he'll have. So I always ask him the kind of question that ruins victims' games. I ask them this question, and this is the anti-game playing question. If it weren't What would you be doing if it weren't for this law? This is a good question. Write this down sometime with your friend. We'll repeat it over the weekend. What would you be doing if it weren't for this tax? And then you ask the person, you say, oh, well, I'd be building up this part of my business, I'd be doing this. If it weren't for this law, I'd be engaging in this kind of interpersonal relationship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go, oh, is there any part of that you could do right now? And they go, well, yeah, I could do a little bit of it. And then the real clinker is, what keeps you from beginning to do it right now? Suppose they never change the law. Couldn't you get part of what you wanted instead of none? It gets you off your victim position and playing the victim. The idea that you got to blame everybody but you for the way your life is working, and especially the government. Now, the kind of questions that game players don't ask, especially victims, is, what results are you seeking? What are you trying to produce? What kind of outcome are you trying to generate? And my old favorite, the Jim Brown question, what are you going to do about it? Taxes are too damn high. What are you going to do about it? Somebody ought to run against that person in my writing. What are you going to do about it? I don't like the way the government's run. What are you going to do about it? I hate the way this government continues to do stupid things. What are you going to do about it? That's a responsibility question, isn't it? Freedom means responsibility. And playing games is a way of divorcing responsibility from you. Because I got to tell you something. I am not an advocate of the freedom philosophy just because I like Robert Metz and Mark Emerling. Those are two very good reasons, but they're not enough. I am involved in politics as an act of self-defense. For myself, for my nieces and nephews, and for the children that come after us. But mainly for me. It is an act of self-defense. If the government finally agreed with us and deregulated, delegislated, and got rid of those stupid laws, would you still involve yourself in politics? Hell no. You'd be doing something useful. City lights would be a chain like B. Dalton's. You'd have Mark Emerlings in every city corrupting the youth. It's more than an adventure, it's just a job. Anyway, second game. All right, now the worst thing you can do to these games that people are playing is name them. If you have a tendency to blame people, and you'll see this in party headquarters, you'll see it over the weekend, you'll see it in your own city. When people go around blaming others, they are pretending they are victims. What are you going to do about it? What steps are you going to take? Now, I'll tell you a story this is one of Michael's insipid stories. This is why wives and husbands think their partner is insane. I was minding my own business, done with the day's writing. I had turned the computer off and I went downstairs. My brain wanted white noise. So what did I do? I turned on television. I thought, what could be stupid, non-challenging, and use up my time? And I thought, television, why not? I clicked it on, and what came on but the news. And on the news was a story about the homeless. Now, do you all get the stories about the homeless? All right. I'm watching this, and this woman is interviewing this fellow, and he said, 2 years ago, I saw the first story on the homeless in my city, and I never dreamed I would be one. A year and a half ago, I was thrown out of work. You get that image? It's like two guys grabbed him at his desk, threw him out of work, right? A few months later, I was thrown out of my home. The same two guys to his home, out in the yard. Since then, I have been one of the homeless. You know, like something to brag about. Me and the other homeless were a year and a half. We got our pins. Looked like little garbage lids on our lapels. And this woman gets into, tell us how miserable it is being homeless. Blah, 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 blah. I have to scavenge for food. I hang out back of Burger King and I eat what's left over. I don't eat the stuff that comes at the front door. So I immediately know this is bad, right? And I turned to Vicki and I said, did you hear that? As though she weren't in the room. As though she weren't listening. She, however, knowing I was setting up for a question, said, oh, what's your point? This is this is why I'm not in an institution and why she loves me. And I said, did you hear the question that the reporter didn't ask the man? She said, no. She said, it's always very important. Everybody listens to what people say. I listen to what they don't say. That's an important part of what they're communicating, what they don't say, isn't it? And I said, what they didn't say was this. Mr. Jones, you've been out of work a year and a half. How many days is that? What, about 500? Okay. Mr. Jones, how many job applications did you fill out yesterday? Uh-huh. And how many job applications did you fill out the day before? And how many job applications did you fill out the day before that? You see, when you don't have a job, your job is to get a job. I don't know about you, but I've been out of work, and I'll tell you something. You can fill out a lot of applications if you've got free time that homeless people have. I'm not without sympathy towards someone who has mental illness. We usually elect them. That keeps them off the street. But, what nobody asked these people was the self-responsibility question. The question is, whose responsibility is it to find you a job? It's yours. It's not your mother's, it's not your priest's, it's not your government's, it's yours. Freedom means responsibility. But this guy wanted to play the victim game. And the reporter said, I'll play. Oh, I'll play. I had one of the homeless. Do you have them collecting money on the streets in your city?
Yes.
In Las Vegas, they do it right at the traffic mediums. And it offends me personally to have people spending their time in zero-sum gain behavior. All charity is zero-sum gain. A dollar goes from person A to person B. No production is occurring. It's just a transfer of wealth. When they could be out doing stuff. I pulled into my favorite video store, and there was a guy saying, hey man, I'm one of the homeless. Can you give me a hand? And I couldn't resist, so I said, I'll tell you what. I said, that's my video store. They've got window washing stuff inside. If you wash the window inside and outside, I'll give you $10. All right, it's about an hour job, an hour and a half. Well, $10, if you go to your grocery store, will feed you for about 4 or 5 days. Especially if you're on grains and rice and beans and stuff like that. Hey, the food isn't great, but what do you expect if you're not working for a living? You can live very cheaply on this planet. It is not that expensive to survive. I offered to give them $10. I figured I could make a deal with my video store that they give me 3 free tapes. So they didn't lose anything, and I didn't lose anything. And I got the window washed. And this guy looked at me and says, what do you think I am? I said, I thought you were looking for an opportunity to earn money, to get back on your feet. He said, I've got my dignity. And I said, no, you don't. And I wonder how many other people there are out there like that, who would choose to be lazy and live that passive life rather than take the responsibility. I was willing to help. An hour and a half for $10? Come on, you can't get that kind of money. And it's tax-free because I'm not going to declare it. He's not going to declare it. He wanted to play the victim. Now, my mother has a bird feeder. Do you guys ever have hummingbird feeders? You like the little feeders? You put the seed in there? I hang one right outside the window to tease the hell out of my cats. It's much cheaper than cruelty or buying a small rodent. So we fill it up, and my mother got a bird feeder for me and my wife, and it was like this. In it, you read the instructions, and it said, fill the bird feeder. When the bird feeder gets empty, allow it to remain empty for a few days. Otherwise, the birds will come to depend upon you and not learn to forage for themselves. Now, isn't there something significantly wrong with the society in which the people who make bird feeders care more about responsibility and self-reliance than the people that run the government programs? Isn't there something significantly wrong? Now, that's the victim game. Usually all you have to do is point out you're playing the victim. And that's enough. There's a second game, which is the martyr game. I know nobody here ever plays the martyr. My mother played the martyr. And you can tell the person that plays the martyr game in the Freedom Party. They'll give you lines like, Look what I do for the Freedom Party. Look at all the work I do. And they're usually telling it to someone who doesn't care, which makes it especially delicious. See, there is justice in the world. You're passionately telling someone who doesn't care about something you want them to care about, which they're not going to, which is mutually frustrating. You wasted their time and they wasted your feelings. Now, the next line you'll hear is, nobody appreciates me. Here I am, I do this for the party, I collected garbage for the party, I didn't vote for the garbage in the other party. Whine, 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 whine. Now, Mark doesn't play the martyr. Mark doesn't play the martyr. He plays the kamikaze pilot. We'll get to that later. That's all right. He's got an extra seat for you. Now, the attitude of the martyr is it's your duty or your obligation to go do something. I got to tell you something in the Freedom Party that I believe. You do not have a duty or obligation to give 1 penny to Robert Metz or to Mark Emerling. You don't have a duty or an obligation to give 1 moment of your time to the Freedom Party. You don't have an obligation or a duty to do anything for the Freedom Party. But it is the wise, humane, good thing to do. A choice, because freedom means choice. I would rather have you choose to give Mark money than feel obligated to give it. One is given freely and one is given begrudgingly. The martyr wants to pretend that the way to keep the furnaces for freedom burning is to throw themselves in as kindling and then bitch about room temperature and tell you it's your fault the room temperature's high because you didn't jump in too. Every martyr loves company. They say misery loves company, martyrs love crowds. All right? Now, what's the payoff is you get to feel sorry for yourself. Now, feeling sorry for yourself is a lot of fun. It takes up time. It's much more interesting than soap operas. And you can call people who don't care and tell them, thus making their lives diminish just a little bit. Now, you get to feel indispensable. What does the martyr feel? If it weren't for me, this party would be in the gutter. If it weren't for me, things wouldn't be going as well as they're going. I'm the only thing that stands between the Freedom Party and destruction. I got news for you. No one of us is that important to the success of the party. We're all important. But the party doesn't live or die by whether Robert is involved or Mark is involved or you're involved or I'm involved. It's all of our involvement contributes, but it doesn't rest on any one person's shoulders. That's why we cooperate and work together, is because it benefits all of us, right? But no one is indispensable to the success of any organization. I know it's a sad thought when you find out if you ever get fired from a job, the business rarely goes belly up the next day. You'd like them to, they deserve it, they should, but they don't. And that's equally true of the Freedom Party. Now, in the long run, if you play the martyr game, you start generating resentment against the efforts that you're making. I don't want you to give out of duty or obligation or charity. I want you to give out of abundance and caring and being concerned about the freedom ideals. You see, a free society, freedom has something for everybody. A free society is not a duty or an obligation. It is a pleasure. It is not something that we ought to heroically endure. It's something we ought to wallow in pleasurably. Now, after the resentment, what happens is usually burnout. Most of your burnout cases you'll find within the political spectrum is by people who do work they don't want to do. They get involved in activities they don't want to be involved in. For people that don't want them to be involved, this is the unwilling working for the ungrateful theory. And I got to tell you, it doesn't work. My recommendation is pick activities that you like in the Freedom Party. And whether it's writing essays, I read consent, I enjoy it, I like it very, very much. There are some people who are good writers. There are some people who are excellent candidates. There are some people who are very, very good with business management. All of us have our skills. We all have our callings that we're especially good at. And your strength might be much, much different than mine. You know, there are people here that can do stuff that, honest to God, not only can't I do, I don't want to ever learn how. And I'm glad they like to do it. I'm really glad they like to do it. That way I don't have to do it. I don't computer program, but I'm a user. I love using computers, but I don't like programming. I like to use them for my writing and for my work. But I don't like to do it. And I'm glad there are people that like to program, because they make my life better. Now, the next item, the games Freedom Advocates play is called the Kamikaze Pilot. This doesn't have anything to do with anyone in this room. This doesn't have anything to do with any one person in this room. Anyway, I teased Mark. Why not everybody else does? Why shouldn't I join the crowd? Now, actually, to tell you the truth, I remember Mark way back when, and he's improved. Scary, huh? Absolutely scary. Kamikaze Pilot works like this. Kamikaze Pilot is, and this is why it doesn't apply to Mark, because Mark actually succeeds very well at doing what he wants to do. He achieves his goals, he gets his point across. Kamikaze Pilot is basically a born loser. This is the schmuck that tells you, I've got a brilliant plan to run a winning election. Now this is in a riding where you've gotten like 2% of the vote the last 2 elections. He's got a brilliant plan to run the ultimate campaign. Here's the plan. He's going to take all the money he's ever earned in his life, borrow money from his mother, his father, his sister, his brother. You're going to take a second mortgage on your house because you like him and because you trust him, because, hey, it's for the good of the cause. Tell you what we're going to do. This fellow's going to jump into this lovely new airplane. It's a 2-seater. It's got wonderful insignia. It's green. It says Freedom Party. The quality went in before the name went on. And this guy is going to put you in the back seat. You're going to be paying for the gas. You're going to do the tune-up on a plane. And this guy's got a history of crashing. He's going to take it out, do 2 barrel rolls, find the closest garbage scow, and fly into it. But, unlike you, he had a parachute. You'll find people in your political activities who have this unerring ability to fail. They can grasp failure from the jaws of victory any day. These people are people who cannot succeed. It's not in their nature. Their whole life pattern is built around failing and watching people sort of go down in the flames. Now, you'll notice them because every one of their projects doesn't go anywhere near success. It goes the opposite direction. You'll notice them because they come up with grandiose plans. I got to tell you, Rome was not burnt in a day. And Ottawa was not expanded in a day. It is not going to occur overnight. It's not going to be one of these situations like Atlas Shrugged where you get the radio for 3 hours and people listen to your philosophy lecture and go, oh, how shallow of me, how could I have been so wrong, oh, woe, oh, woe. Tomorrow I'll go vote for the Freedom Party so that I can save what's left of my worthless little soul. You are swept into office the next day. Mark Emerling becomes premier and degovernmentalizes everything. He says, thou art free, click. And they shut down the government. They have, going out of business signs in front of the, all the government buildings and all of the programs. The railroads get sold overnight to a woman named Dagny Taggart. Nobody in here has this vision, but sooner or later you're going to attract someone who does. And some of them, he's going to have a Professor Harold Hill personality. He's going to be so persuasive, butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, and it's probably margarine anyway. And it's going to sound so good, and you're going to want to believe it. I love dreams. Dreams are very important. You have to be able to dream, but you have to be able to dream with your eyes open. Don't jump on that kamikaze plane. I got to tell you, what can you build out of a large failure? I mean, it's hard to build on a large failure. The Little Big Run, right? Custer's Last Stand. It's hard to build anything on that. But you can build on small successes. You can add to small successes. One small success can add another small success, which can add to another small success. And before you know it, like a string of pearls, you have freedom. The difficulty with the kamikaze pilot is he sounds so good, and you want to believe that it could be done overnight. There is no overnight success for freedom. There is no overnight change in your health. There is no overnight transformation. It is not Saul on the road to Damascus where you're struck by God and you change your life. It is not an issue where, like the Buddha, you sit under the tree, realize enlightenment, and go on and change the world. Freedom takes time. Tyranny took time, freedom will take time. Now, of course, we want to put it on the express train. Of course we do. but we don't want to jump on the train with the kamikaze pilot. Now, then there's one of my old favorites, the Critic. This is a favorite freedom game. This is the game of freedom advocates who are not spending their time building the organization. Their time is not spent on something so petty as building the Freedom Party. They spend their time criticizing people who do, which is, as we all know, a much more important activity. It's not good enough that you be active in your writing, that you bring new people in the movement, that you write a good letter to the editor or an excellent editorial. It's important that you trash a fellow freedom advocate who isn't quite as pure as you are. This way you can do two things. You can feel A, practical, and B, really moral. The Critic is a fun game because you can always find flaws in everything anybody does. There's no one in this room I can't pick flaws about. Well, Mark, excuse me. Everybody except Mark, I can actually find flaws in their behavior. You can do all kinds of games with people's flaws. Bob Metz is not, he's not dynamic enough. And Mark is too sedate. Uh-oh, I made an error in judgment, and the Critic will get me. You can criticize people for doing too much of something, too little of something, not doing something often enough, not doing it on Tuesday, not being there when I was there doing it, or wasting other people's time doing it, you creep. Being a critic of other freedom advocates is not a useful activity. I gotta tell you, it's like the old wagon trains that would go across the West. The Indians would begin to attack, John Wayne movie time. The wagons would circle, everyone would draw their gun and face inward. First guy makes a wrong move, gets it. We are not the enemy. We are the allies. We are the people who are trying to build, as the Fraser Institute is, as the von Mises Institute is, as the Cato Institute is, as the Freedom Party is. We're trying to build a freedom movement so that we can have a future where we can reap the benefits and have the choices we deserve to have. Now, the Critic is usually the one I end the games freedom advocates play with, but I've discovered since then an even worse game player. The worst, most insipid, devious, underhanded, slimy, worthless, socially unacceptable, ought to be shunned person. And this is the kind of person that points out the games that other people play. I want to tell you something. There is no holier than thou in this game. I want you to be aware we all make mistakes. And I want us to realize that while we will play these games, and you'll get angry at Mark, and you're going to get angry at Robert, and it's all right to be angry with one another. You don't have to love everybody every minute of every day in order to work with them, in order to recognize that they're your allies, not your enemies, that they're your friends, not your adversaries, that they, like you, really hold freedom dear. If they didn't, they wouldn't be here. They would go home and forget about it and watch TV. They would have the IQ of a rutabaga, a personality of a speed bump. And they would watch reruns of Gilligan's Island. They don't do this. They come here and they put in the time, and they come to the office and put in the time. Everybody here is making a contribution. And everybody here is doing what they can in their own way. And sometimes it's just a little bit. But sometimes just a little bit makes a big difference. You don't know what effect your activism will have. I'll tell you a little story. There was an interview being done by an editor, by a writer for TV Guide. She was interviewing a philosopher from Russia who wrote under the name Ayn Rand. And this writer for TV Guide spent the time doing an article on Miss Rand. And when it was all over, the writer, whose name is Edith Ephron, said, "My whole life I've been looking for this kind of point of view. I never realized it existed." And she became an advocate of freedom then. She thought she was a liberal all those years. One conversation changed the direction of her life. You don't know that you won't talk to the next Thomas Jefferson, or Ludwig von Mises, or Karl Menger, or John Stuart Mill, or Ayn Rand, or God Save Your Women and Children, Mark Emerling. You don't know what impact your little contribution will have, but I want to be very clear with you, is that the games we play with one another can be fun, but let's not mistake them for real activism. Real activism develops more people in the freedom movement. Now, I wanted to end not with a talk, but just with a brief sharing of something that I wanted to tell you about tomorrow. And that's, some of you have been to, how many of you have been to a seminar before? Right. I can remember the last time because I remember a young girl with her comic book husband actually getting up and having the courage to say a few things in front of some people that she was scared to death by. And she did it anyway, and I want to tell her how proud I am of her. And it's all right, I'm not going to point to Carol and embarrass her right here. And I won't point to her husband either. You terrible person, Gordon. Anybody that wants to come to the seminar, it is a seminar and a workshop. You do not have to participate in any of the activities. You can watch. There are bystanders. If you feel uncomfortable doing something, you don't have to do it. Take notes. If you want to try something, you can do it. Now, I don't have all the answers. Matter of fact, I haven't even got all the questions yet. I work with political candidates, and I work with people who are trying to build a freedom movement. Let me give you my personal stats, and you judge me. In 1976, I ran for U.S. Congress in the United States of America, in Arizona's second congressional district, against Morris K. Udall. I got 4,300 votes with a budget of, I think, $900 and some odd, which wasn't a bad turnout. At the end of the election, my opponent offered me a job. And I said, "You didn't get the message." And he said, "You got to be flexible on these things." And I thanked him anyway. In the course of the campaign, I recruited over 500 registered to vote freedom advocates. 500. There was nothing special about me at the time. Matter of fact, I make mistakes that I'll point out to you. You know, who says you can't overcome mistakes? My whole life is a sort of a trial and error. It's actually error, trial. Error, trial. Ah, I figured that out. Won't do that again. New error, trial. New error. I evolved to higher levels of error. And even in the course of this, what happened was I was able to bring in a lot of people. And it was because I put my focus on building. Because I got to tell you something. People are the solution to every problem the Freedom Party has. You don't have enough money? More people solves it. You don't have enough candidate? More people solves it. You don't have enough workers? More people solves it. You don't have enough people vote for you in your writing? Recruit them. They'll vote for you. More people solves it. The solution to every problem we face is more members, more committed advocates of freedom. I failed more than anybody in this room, and I've done it on grand scales in the States, financially, personally, but I've always managed to do it in a unique and interesting way. So my life has never lacked meaning. In the course of the workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to go through different ways of communicating your ideas, different ways of making your ideas connect. Persuasion doesn't take a lot of time. Very often, just a sentence does it. I'll give you a sentence. This was free. I was campaigning for Congress. I had a little old lady in tennis shoes, a John Birch Society member. You know how conservative that is? They make the right to lifers look like flaming liberals. She came up to me and said, "Mr. Emerling," and I always like that when a 70-year-old woman says to a 26-year-old boy, "Mister." There's something wrong there. And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, and she looked around as though anybody was watching. She said, "Mr. Emerling, I like a lot of what you said, but I don't agree with your views on prostitution." Because I thought it, honest to God, ought to be decriminalized, legalized, not bothered by the state. And so I put my hands on her shoulders, and I decided we wouldn't have a long debate. And I looked at her and I said, "It seems to me that prostitution consists of two things: free enterprise and sex. Which one are you against?" 2 weeks later, she mailed me a postcard telling me she had re-registered in my political party. Just a sentence, I made a new connection in her mind. That's what a lot of persuasion is. A good chunk of persuasion is learning how to ask useful questions. That's one of the things we're going to talk about in Mind Focus. and the late great libertarian Macho Flash, and political cross-dressing, the Freedom Store, and words are weapons, words are tools. These are all tools. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist, and he used to say something that I thought was interesting. He said, you know, when the only tool you got is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. When the only method you've got of persuading people is argument, everything starts looking like an argument. And there are more effective ways of enabling people to look at their points of view, using reason, using the facts of reality, and using some very clever approaches that fit in with the nature of their own minds. What's the purpose of this? Very straightforward. This is probably the last 100 years we've got to turn around the flow of big government. I don't think we're going to get another chance. If we blow it in the US and Canada, that's it, end of game. And it's not just for us, it's for the people that follow us. I really don't want to have to talk to my grandnieces and grandnephews, because I have kids, and say to them, the reason that we've got big government is because I didn't feel like getting involved, or I wasn't effective enough, or I didn't care enough. I really want to be able to go to them and point out as historic landmarks government buildings, and have my great-great-great-grandnephews tell me that I'm lying about how bad it was. Because nobody would have put up with that kind of garbage. Come on, you're lying, Uncle Mike, aren't you? People let themselves be taxed. Come on. Oh, come on, that's just movies. Oh, I don't believe that. Come on, what really happened? Come on. Wouldn't you like to have a kid tell you that? Wouldn't you like to have them realize that it was just Dungeons and Dragons played by real people? The bottom line on this is simple and straightforward. I have some skills that I'm good at, and I want to share them with you, and I want to work with you. You have something that I don't have. You have access to people that I don't know. You have access to people maybe I'll never meet. You might meet the next John Galt or Ayn Rand or John Stuart Mill or Richard Cobden or John Bright. You might meet the next Henry David Thoreau or the next Robert Nozick or Ludwig von Mises. I don't know. But that one person could make the difference in Canada's history. And I want, when you meet them, I want them to look you in the eye and say, I've never considered that, and join. Because that could just redirect the direction of history, not just in this country, but on the planet. One person can make that big a difference. Thank you for your time. So I write speeches for politicians, believe it or not, who are pro-freedom politicians. And I also write jokes for comedians. And I promised I wouldn't tell this before the speech. Now, have I kept my promise?
Yeah.
This is how to deceive your spouse without lying. Now, she always knows I'm going to do something grotesque like this. There's a story about a woman who is up in her bridal suite. And he's carried her across the threshold. And she says, honey, I would like you to be especially gentle with me. I am a virgin. And he says, you're a virgin? You've been married 3 times before this. How could you possibly be a virgin? And she said, well, there's a story behind that. And he says, tell me. Well, see, my first husband, we got up to the bridal suite, and we had a wonderful wedding. He's a good-looking guy. Looked like one of those male models. We got up to the suite, and it turned out he was a gay conservative and intended to stay in the closet. So we didn't consummate the marriage. And I had it annulled. And her husband says, yeah, what about the second one? What about the second one? And she said, well, to tell you the truth, I didn't want to make the same mistake that I made the first time. I didn't want to go out with a good-looking guy that looked like he was upwardly mobile and drove the right kind of cars and wore the right kind of clothes. I married a mature man who could care for our children, someone who had the stability and the ability to earn a living. Yeah, what happened with him? Well, we went up to the suite. He carried me across the door very gingerly. I went into the bathroom, put on a beautiful black negligee. I walked into the bedroom. He saw me, had a heart attack, and died. What about your third husband? Oh, my third husband was a political speechwriter. And all night long, he'd sit on the edge of the bed and tell me how good it was going to be. And you're welcome to tell that story to others if you like. Is there anyone who has any questions regarding the weekend or any questions regarding what we're going to do? Any part of the weekend, let me put it like this. It's like a gourmet meal. You don't have to eat all 7 courses to enjoy it. You don't have to buy the whole program to find useful tools there. All right, you'll find some stuff you want to use and some stuff that maybe doesn't fit in with your personality. That's fine. You don't have to be a show-off like I am or like Mark is. Or you don't have to be, you know, well, tedious like Robert Metz. I mean that with love. I like Robert and his wife Brenda. They've been so sweet to me, and their daughter has realized that mental illness is no impediment to earning a good living. They've been so sweet. But I want you to be aware that if you can only come for one day, or if you want to come for both days, that's fine. If you want to come for Monday, that's a different kind of thing. You'll be able to use the stuff over the weekend, not only with political communication, but with your job. I had a person attend a workshop that I gave 3 months ago, and he got fired from his job. Wahoo, you know, thank you, thrown out of work, those same 2 guys. And he called me 2 weeks later, and he'd gotten another job using some of the negotiating skills he'd learned at double the salary. So I asked him for a tip. And he sent it. And so I like that. He sent me $100 and he said, take your wife out for dinner. And it was a good dinner. And I want you to be aware that you'll find stuff that you can use not only in your political communication, but in your personal communication. I got news to you. It's like this. Do you know when the best time, guys, here's the line. This is really a great question. When is the best time to tell your lady that you love her? Before somebody else does. I've rarely found too many marriages that were destroyed or relationships that were destroyed by an overabundance of caring. Most of them die by neglect. Communication is important in our personal life as it is in our political life, as it is in our jobs. And I think you'll find the stuff we do over the weekend will impact in all the areas. And to tell you the truth, minus all the stuff about the politics, the workshop is a kick. I mean, look, I turned him loose. I turned him loose. This guy used to be Clark Kent. He used to be Clark Kent. He used to be respected. He used to be socially acceptable in decent homes. And look what we did to him. And I want you to be aware that well, Mark's a very uninhabited person, so. But he is looking for occupants right now. So, I think you'll find that we can do a lot of different things in the course of the weekend. And I just want to leave you with a line. I'll tell you what, the Art of Political Persuasion Workshop is not just about communication, political persuasion, it's about fun. We have a lot of fun. And just because you're smart doesn't mean that you can't have fun. And just because you're fun doesn't mean you can't be smart. And just because you're poor doesn't mean you can't get to be rich. And just because you're rich doesn't mean you can't give me a tip. I want you to know that the Art of Political Persuasion Workshop is quite honestly the most fun you can have with your clothes on. Thanks for coming. Anybody got questions about tomorrow? What time do we start? I just show. Embrace me. What time?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
Could come a couple minutes early tomorrow. Mark, did you want to say something?
What time did it say?
It said 9:30, but sure, 9:30 to 5:30.
Did it?
Where is it?
What room?
Right here.
Oh,
Right here.
I lied,
9 o'clock.
Liar, liar.
You can come in at anarchist time, anytime before 9.
Okay, terrific. See you tomorrow.
Great. Oh, hey guys, the cooler fixed tomorrow. We agree?
Does your garage inhabit